Hello, and welcome to another episode of my Singularity Let's Play. This is Northstar. I hope you folks are well, taking care of each other and being kind to yourselves. Managed to retain a spot in the top 250 in that. Shoot, what was even the event? I'm tired. I think that was the art one. Which I didn't make it as far as the, abstract impressionism or something. I don't remember. Here's the deep sea one. I always seem to go further in this than most people. I don't know. Maybe it's just not very popular for whatever reason. I like it. Maybe it's because of my training as a biologist. By training, I mean actual graduate degree in biology. I was telling that to my landlord today. He was surprised, even though I've mentioned it only like a zillion times, so maybe not to him. He prefers, I think, to let down me to assume that because I got long COVID, that somehow I must not have been educator stuff. It's like, nope, I had a master's degree. I was very close to having 2 more master's degrees. I was working as an EMT for clinical hours because you need that if you want to get to med school, and I wanted to be a physician. The 2 more master's degrees were not just a RAM. I wasn't just collecting degrees. That'd be a terrible idea with the amount of student loan debt in the US. No, I was doing a special master's, which helps you get into medical school. It gives you additional coursework that's very, very relevant to med school because in many cases it's either upper level undergrad type bio stuff, or in the case of some of the harder special master's programs I thought I was doing, it's actually a portion of the first year of an MD, like the same academic material. First year of an MD is usually basic medical science. It's not really, they start people in all diagnostic stuff, and that's the stuff they cut out. And then they do cut out some of the medical science, but less. Whereas they cut out all the diagnostic stuff because they don't want, people who are not doctors thinking they can diagnose people. Anyways, and the point is, program that's a little bit less intense and allows the students to learn stuff real well, get A's, and then that proves they can handle. I mean, not everyone will get A's, but the ones who get A's and it prove they can handle the med school material, even if they may not do quite as well in the greater amount of material in MD, shows they can handle on some level, and because they've learned stuff very well, it'll make the first year easier because they've seen everything before. It's basically repeating classes in some cases, like in my program where the material was literally taught by the same professors who taught the medical students. Because special master's programs are often at med schools. This one was. So it was at the medical school in the classrooms where the medical students learned at different hours, taught by the medical school professors, using the same facilities, even using some of the same cadavers. Right? Cadavers. We do that in this. Am I completely imagining that? No. Can I not remember if we did cadavers in this? I know I did cadavers at least twice in my education. In a night class that was at a very prestigious school, an anatomy class, and like human cadavers. And earlier in grad school, my first master's, where I took a class no one undergrads took that was an anatomy class. I swear we did in the special masters, so I can't remember. Maybe my long COVID, my memory is impaired. But yeah, I was straight A's, top of the program. Because even though they didn't post what the exam scores were, they did post the curve, so people knew what the highest scores were, and sometimes here or there may have set the curve in an exam, which caused some of my peers to hate me. And when I didn't, it was only like a point or two below, and there was so much rumors that it became clear how many people had done what, even though I tried to not take part in that. After people started targeting me, I made the mistake of being pressured into sharing with some people who hated me. I didn't know they hated me, but they already secretly hated me. Roommates. And, well, actually, maybe they came to secretly resent me because on like one of the first exams, I shared my score and was miles ahead of any of them. I got a sheepish look on my face, like, "Oh, is you? What score? What score? Did you? But you did not that great in your." I'm not sure if that was good humor or they already disliked me. You know, they were still acting nice at that point. Either way, turned out I'd done way, way, way better than any of them. They definitely hated me after that point if they didn't already. Because people seem to think that if they don't like someone, that person should be dumb or incapable, and they're pissed when someone they dislike does way better at something. These guys were jerks. Anyways, yeah, I was doing great. I was definitely going to get into a med school somewhere. Program head was directing me towards Australian and Irish med schools because it would have been a waste to go to a Caribbean med school. I definitely could do better and match better residencies, and the program head knew I wanted to get out of the country because of the way the U.S. was sliding fascist. This was during the Biden years, but I knew that fascists would be back. She might have thought I was a little overly afraid, but I was afraid someone like Trump would come back and win again, and Trump came back. I was precisely correct. Anyways, yeah, so I special masters, and since it was going to be 2 years of special masters, the first year classes, sometimes people would have to repeat classes who were doing marginally, though they usually get into med schools in the second year, where it would just be a research year. People did well like me. But I decided to take another course that could be done in the second, another master's could be done in the second year, so it was in the classroom instead. Or even partly because I wanted to have even more courses they would do well in. So that med schools would be sure to accept me, because my undergrad grades are not amazing. So I was trying to, average it out with some really high grades so that the overall GPA they calculate wouldn't be as only moderately good would be really good, You get a lot more data points. And also because the second master's gave me skills to do management roles in clinical research. Which may sound... in clinical research, you have these people who aren't actually paid that well, who manage a lot of the scientists who actually have more education and more skills and are paid better. It's kind of weird. There are different levels with that management and kind of junior positions to kind of learn the job before you step up into the full manager role, but even the more senior ones are not paid nearly as well as, say, the PhDs. Because what you're paid has nothing to do with how much value you contribute. It has to do with how hard you're to replace, mostly, as long as the value you contribute is more than what you're paid. Employers pay as well as possible. Of course, I would argue the PhDs did more valuable work than the managers anyways, but yeah, still a better career than going back to EMS if I decided to make it to med schools. So that was my backup plan. Fortunately, couldn't do my backup plan because I got long COVID, wasn't able to finish the programs. The research project that I was working on simultaneously with the classes my second year, or at the very final classes for the second master's. And I'd already finished all the classes for the first with straight A's. Although you did get rated on the final research project. So technically I was done with everything that had grades. But anyways, I was able to finish. School, in fact, fucked me, and instead of letting me do withdrawals because I got sick, it forced me into Fs because it was past the normal withdrawal deadline when I got long COVID, even though I would have had like B's, C's, D's, depending on which course we're talking about. Like a B, a C, and a D, if just based on the partial amount of work that was already done. But it was courses where if you didn't finish the final project, they could automatically give you F's no matter how high your grades were. And that university did not have a policy to go back, and if you got like in a car accident or got a bad disease or whatever and suddenly couldn't finish the semester, where you could take a withdrawal. Most universities have such policies. This one did not. And they refused to even consider like changing the policy. It's like, this clearly indicates the policy is flawed. It's not fair to screw GPA up if there's ever a cure for long COVID. And they're like, oh, well, if there's ever a cure, you can come back, reapply, and take the same courses over and replace these grades. It's like, med schools will still see those Fs. It's not freaking me over. But anyways, I would have, graduated with straight A's if not for long COVID. That partial credit BC's D's, but I'm saying, I was on track to get A's when all the material was done, But if you've done only 60% of the final grade for a course is already done, even though everything's done at A level, that's like more than 60. If it's between 60 and 70, and at A level, then that's technically a D at that point, even though you'd have an A. But like I said, I had to drop because my brain doesn't work anymore. In fact, I was terrified to spend the loan. I felt like it's like anybody can say they have long COVID. It's like no, there's actually quite a lot of symptoms, and people would know if they had it. Not only doctors trying to figure out if someone's faking symptoms, but I literally thought I had a stroke, like in my sleep when I woke up one day relatively early after my coronavirus infection. It was actually the second time I got it, where my brain just wasn't working. It was like I was worried something had happened to me, like one of those nights towards the end of the virus, that maybe I'd like had a small stroke or something. But there's so many other symptoms that's long COVID. Of course, there is evidence of permanent brain damage to people with long COVID who died. Sometimes the causes relate to it, sometimes because like heart attacks are more common with it, sometimes unrelated, like someone who had long COVID got in a car accident, they did an autopsy and there was like brain damage not dissimilar to a stroke. So it might be that even if there's ever a cure, there's permanent damage. Of course, the brain, if you get injured younger like I did, it can rewire itself. So if my symptoms went away, like the brain fog, I might just be able to relearn stuff that I may have to go back and repeat courses because there's gaps in my knowledge. It can never be filled. Or it can never just be filled by remembering stuff, but can be filled by relearning stuff in different parts of the brain, The brain has actually a surprising amount of plasticity, younger brains anyways. So got long COVID at 31. It's not like it was super old. Of course, I'm aging, and the brain becomes less plastic as you age, and the government seems to have no interest in pouring in the money to actually cure long COVID, even though there's some efforts to do like a quote moonshot and put major amounts of funding into it, and the bills didn't pass because the fucking Republicans voted them down. So there is, which is something I didn't dare say to the landlord because he's like a freaking hyper conservative idiot who thinks like all the people in this apartment seem to think that the Democrats are evil, which actually they are, and that the Republicans are great, which they're not. They're even more evil than the Democrats. I'm to the left of Bernie Sanders. Both parties are shit in the United States. It's just a question of the lesser of two evils every time in elections. I'm not a swing state, so I'm not going to vote in the presidency for a Democrat because there's no freaking reason to. I'll vote third party because this state will not ever decide the outcome of an election. I'm not going to say if it's a solid red or a solid blue state, but it is not a purple state, therefore, but down ticket, I'll still vote for Democrats because they can lose those seats. It always pisses me off when people try lesser of two evils logic and then say everyone has to vote even by their own logic, in non-swing states, people should still vote their conscience because it's not enough people are going to do it to ever swing those states. And if they do, the election was lost anyways for the Democrats. So it's bullshit. Anyways, so that's the other things. I'm probably going to be starting I am starting back up my Mount and Blade Warband Let's Play series. I'm probably going to be doing Lord of the Rings Online one at some point. Thought maybe I'm feeling a little inspired to do it soon-ish. It's funny how the seasons and stuff affect what games I seem to be drawn to streaming. Recording for YouTube. Maybe eventually go back to Twitch streaming, but no one was showing up, and of course, that shouldn't necessarily I presume that on Twitch it's hard to get your first viewers, but once you do, things might grow faster on YouTube. Things grow on the time scale of months, what might only take days or weeks on Twitch. I don't know, so maybe I should go back to that. Could just be banging my head against the wall, and right now I'm too much stressful in my life to want to deal with the disappointment if I do spend weeks there, and it grows very slowly even once I get my first couple of viewers. And then having to let them down if it's just not going anywhere. Since YouTube is further along. And anyways, I need to monetize so I can supplement SSI with a little money from YouTube. I doubt I'll ever make nearly enough to live off from this, but it's one of the very few things I can do is YouTubing. But anyways, I may do a Lord of the Rings Online Let's Play series soonish. I had some characters on a server that they shut down recently. Saying some games shut down some of their old 32-bit servers as they're creating 64-bit ones. And I missed the transfer. I missed the period of transfer before they shut down and realized any of it was going on because I very rarely need the news for liking the launcher. I just go right into the game. And so I have to wait till they'll eventually bring that servers back as Dark Worlds, ones that you can't actually load up, but you can transfer characters off for free. And I'll have to do that. But I could create a new character on a server. I don't intend to transfer those characters over to. Maybe I'll get so attached and I'll just keep up with it, or if the Dark World things takes forever. And it may be more interesting to YouTube folks to see a brand new character. And I can try, if they do the Dark World thing in reasonable time, streaming that and see if all my views drop off of a cliff and people would rather watch the character they can see from the creation, then maybe I'll just have to semi-ban those established characters. Probably still keep them on whatever server I won't play that I transferred them to at that point, but just play the new character, and eventually other characters are created in that server, and shelf those other characters for either if I ever decide to play the game for my personal enjoyment. Pretty much I don't play any games I don't record now because I desperately need money. SSI is very, very, very little to live on, even though apparently there is a way to save money up on it, despite the $2,000 asset limit in your bank accounts and normal investment accounts. Apparently, this is something that was not well published and very few people seem to be aware of. There were these special type of investment savings accounts created in 2017, actually, possibly by Obama's outgoing Congress or brand new one, which would have actually included a lot of Republicans, but maybe the Republicans are willing to do this. They sometimes do things Democrats won't that are good, although usually they're shit. The most common was actually some of those Tea Party types because they were very anti-establishment. And occasionally they recognized problems the system are willing to take on. Anyways, no matter which Congress it was that did it in 2017, early 2017, which is why I think it was actually Obama's outgoing Congress, they passed a bill to create a special kind of account called an ABLE account. a very optimistic, maybe euphemistic way of, referring to disability. It's an able account for the disabled, right? It's very Orwellian, but that people who are disabled on SSI, I think that's the elderly are relying on SSI and may also have SSDI, but they're so poor they're barely surviving. Although it's a worse idea for them, so it's mainly very much for the disabled, younger disabled people can shift money into these accounts. The rules, every state gets to do it differently. Most of them will have a mutual fund manage it, and so there is some return on investment. It's not like just a bank account, no interest, although it's usually not as good as I could get just by investing in index funds, so I have to suffer lower returns to be able to do SSI, and there's a limit of not being able to save more than $100,000 in this. So it's not only the return's lower, but there's that limit. You can still lose SSI if you ever end up managing to accumulate over 100,000 in the able account, which is kind of shitty because if you want to say buy a home or something and you're an SSI, banks may not lend you money with that little of a down payment, and you're allowed to have a home on SSI already, so people who didn't own homes that got stable can screw them. There is a way to still save for that, and that's to create a special type of trust fund that existed long before the able accounts. But people who were disabled who weren't from very rich families are never able to do that in the first place because it costs I think $5,000 in legal fees to set one of those accounts up. So either not able to afford in the first place if someone's disabled and already in the SSI range or less than 5,000, or it's not a great idea when they become disabled because it takes a while to get SSI, and Social Security Administration can really slow that down so that people can be waiting a year. So point being, but if you're say from a rich family, and this is why rich people didn't care to reform the system, they might set up one of those accounts for if they had rich parents and their kid got disabled, they'd set up one of these special trust funds which could be used for housing expenses, including buying a home, but also rent and stuff, food. Basically a lot of the same things that the able accounts could be used for, except no asset limit on it. A trust fund, so there are more restrictions on withdrawing the money, whereas the able account people can just, they're using it for one, it's easier for them to get the money if they're using it for one of the qualified expenses. But I think trust funds have maintenance fees, so it only made sense to people with large amounts of money. But the existence of the able account does create a way for someone who's disabled to eventually save close to the asset limit, then create one of those funds, hopefully being allowed to use the able account money for that, but if not, possibly able to use the able account to pay for all their living rent and food for, food, there's food stamps, but all their rent and certain incidentals like transportation for a while putting all the SSI checks towards creating such a fund, assuming that's not a forbidden thing to use it on. I don't think it's because I think SSI just gives you cash. Maybe certain things you're not allowed to gamble or something while on it, I don't know. But presumably still able to create that special trust fund one way or another, and then you can save up to buy a house more than 100K. Of course, actually saving that much is probably impossible, even with return on investment, because SSI is a pathetically small amount, $960 a month, with sometimes state supplements. They're usually not more than an extra 100, which is ridiculous because the states are usually high cost of living states, where that even 1,000 whatever goes much less far than 960 would go in a low cost of living state. So it's a lot of the blue high cost of living states, but they still screw people because effectively they're asking their disabled to live on less than some of the red states with low cost of living. Yeah, these blue states are not the liberal utopias that people pretend, and sometimes worse, they just put on a show because the Democrat Party is still an evil party, and they just want to be seen as more virtuous and be so less shitty than the Republicans. They still always serve the billionaires. Like I said, to the left of Sanders, I think we need to end the two-party system, which means we need to get first past the post-voting and move to a proportional representation system. It's the only way the third parties can really get anywhere. People talk about ranked choice. No, that's not enough, because third parties still aren't going to get anywhere unless they put up a really, really, really good candidate who so many people put as their second picks. It's going to still be very, very. You need proportional representation, so that if you have a party that state this, say, with proportional representation as 10 congressional seats, which you may also want to expand Congress, it artificially limited size in the 1920s, I think it was. It was intentionally done as a bit of political exploitation of the system, changing the rules to create an unfair playing field, because I think it was actually the Republicans so Republicans being shitty, but actually back then they were the more left-wing party in some ways. Wasn't until FDR where the Democrats really solidly became more left-wing than Republicans. But because there was a shift of voters from countryside to cities, and the flyover states were already starting to empty out back then, so to make that less impactful, they artificially limited the size of the House of Representatives to 435, even though it had grown with the population of the United States until that point. It's a bit of nonsense, completely unfair, undermining the democratic system, as in democracy with a lowercase d, not as in democratic like the Democrat Party. It was undermining democracy, moving us towards oligarchy, because if there are fewer members of the House of Representatives relative to the population, it makes it harder for ordinary people to run successfully, since it's becomes more and more expensive to run, and you need big money backing you. More likely that politicians will sell it to lobbyists, more likely that they will have a lot of personal wealth even before they run. So it makes the House of Representatives more like the Senate, which was always intended to be an elitist body that's hard to get into. Though not nearly as hard as it is today, because populations of the states were so much smaller that the House of Representatives is now more elitist than the Senate was meant to be at the country's creation. And the Senate is ridiculous in some of the larger population states that it's very elitist and inaccessible to people of lesser means. Now, of course, there are rules about requiring to own property to vote and stuff that made the system more oligarchical when the country was first founded. But then it did, after the Civil War, become more democratic. Again, with lowercase d, with slaves being freed and given the right to vote, and a lot of reforms the Republicans actually did, because, Lincoln, Republican, they were the ones that won the Civil War. Republicans, after the U.S. Civil War, actually made a lot of reforms. Back then, they were very much the more left-wing party, whereas the Democrats were the right-wing one. It made the system less oligarchical than it had been, although it did also shift what oligarchical tendency there was to the system, from agricultural aristocrats to factory owners, which of course had a potential to grow enormously in wealth and power as technology developed and eventually become so much more powerful that the system is even more oligarchical really than it was when it was the rural aristocracy, because big farmers have nothing on wealth to the tech billionaires today, nothing on wealth and power. It's not even can't compare. I mean, we still have large wealthy farming families. They still exist. They're not nearly as wealthy as tech billionaires, though, and never will be. Increasingly, the farms are getting bought out by the tech billionaires who are buying farms, which I guess will make them a sort of rural aristocracy, but their wealth won't come from the countryside. And they won't live there, so not really. The speed tech billionaires who have to own farms. Eliminating even the wealthy farming families that exist. Final nail in that coffin. It's been dying for a long time. Let's see. Getting towards 30 minutes, I should end this, but as usual, little bit of history, a little bit of politics here, a little bit of whatever's in my mind. Even thinking about path where I might survive. SSI enable account if I can supplement SSI with YouTube. Though for every $2 I earn, YouTube will get $1 less SSI is the way it works. But if I can make enough to substantially, if I get up to an income of like, I don't know, $1,400 a month, I might be able to eventually put enough away to move to one of those trust funds and eventually save up enough for like a deposit, down payment on a very small house. Might be by that point like $150K for absolute starter home if I can find one. Because housing prices are just going to keep going up. You don't need that much now, but by the time I had being, prices keep going up, I'd be able to save at a meager rate. So probably that or even more, depending on, assuming that banks require at least 20% down for someone disabled buying a home off with SSI. It's in the special trust funds that allow that. Someone who becomes disabled already owns a home, can own the home, and that doesn't disqualify them from SSI. And since you can have much more housing space and higher quality housing for the same cost of mortgage, costs far less than rent, it's a bit of privileging the middle class or the more established. Since, I might by some definitions have been considered to be born into middle class, but I was young when I was disabled. I've been investing in my education rather in skills that suddenly became worthless when I got disabled, rather than in saving up to buy a home, which I probably could have done instead of going to grad school if I hadn't wanted to be a doctor. Anyways. Yeah, so look out for Mount and Blade Warband videos going up. Look out for War of the Rings Online if I start a series on that. And hopefully don't have the company decide they don't like my politics and are going to try and tell me to stop streaming their game or ban my account there or God knows what. I am leftist, and a lot of these companies and MMO companies, even the free ones like that, tend to be much more aggressive about policing what people stream in their games. Especially if I stream and I talk about any politics stuff while I'm doing stuff, they're likely to throw a fit. Censorship is real. And it's no censorship if it's a company doing it instead of the government. No. Since more and more of everything is owned by private individuals and companies in the United States, as we privatize and shrink government ever further and move deeper into neoliberal capitalism. And that basically means that you can be censored because the government has less and less power, and instead people who are allowed to censor you have all the power. It's bullshit. There's no free speech is an illusion if the people who own all the important stuff are allowed to ignore protections on free speech. But, freedom under capitalism has always been an illusion. It's a system that at best allows people to imagine that they have control of their lives, hands off, but with billionaires or multi-millionaires who can easily step in at any time and control people. Freedom isn't real if someone can take it away from you at any moment. And billionaires have often been able to do that even when they haven't always chosen to, because it's easier to hold onto power if you only exercise the power carefully. But you can see that kind of exercise of power with what's going on in the Near East right now, with billionaires going and trying to get people fired and blacklisting them from their companies for saying things they don't like about a certain international conflict. That is part of how the freedom has always been an illusion under the system. Just becoming more obvious now is all. But we'll see. Maybe I can stream War of the Rings Online and I won't get shit over it from the company. probably too small a notice anyways, since YouTube is never, I think 108 subs now. Never really given me the impressions I ought to because of soft censorship, and I'll probably never get a very big channel. That is, YouTube does ban leftists, usually just doesn't give them as many impressions, which are like when people see a video as a recommended video. Such gives them a lot less, so that left-wing channels have trouble growing and never get the same platform size as right-wing channels. So they're basically favoring fascists. Although if someone goes too far to the right, they will still censor them if they start going to actual hate speech. But if they refrain from that, a lot of the fascists who don't do hate speech are able to freely push their abhorrent ideas about like lack of liberty and such, and xenophobia, whereas leftists are constantly censored. Because that's what's in the interest of billionaires. It's ironic that Google, that YouTube, is the lesser evil here. And so many of this, like, social media platforms are even worse. Reddit has been taken over by people who were involved in like masterminding the Iraq War. And for instance, there's a great article, Jessica Ashew and the Taming of Reddit, you should read. Viewer, please do. By you, I mean you, the viewer. Please go look that article up and read it. It's by Mint Press, I think, which of course certain lobbies got demonetized here on YouTube, which is bullshit and a bit of censorship, and it's always the left that gets censored, never the right, unless the right does something particularly egregious, because the right pose no threat to billionaires and the left does. So, but this cannot continue. The system's getting worse. I fear because it's not something I would like to see happen. It would be bad and horrible, but I fear the U.S. is probably headed towards a civil war. That will suck. That will very much suck in a lot of pain and suffering, and it probably will result in fascists taking advantage of the chaos to seize power in a more open way than they already have. God, I said I was going to end this earlier, and now I'm going towards 40 minutes. I tend not to cut the Cell Singularity videos here like I do most of my series when they get too long. Of course, this does mix it up where everything else is like 15 minutes, and here, if you really want to watch a longer video, you can. So, I guess there's a silver line to that. Okay, let me push through just these last little things here. Things like missions that have a long time. Well, hours or days. The white dwarfs, the red dwarfs, and the geode from the Mesozoic Valley, and I should get this ending. I do the red dwarfs because sometimes you get Darwinium cubes from them. I don't care about the cards. Dark matter's nice, but I could get more just by doing these. But the Darwinium is probably hundreds of times more valuable. Can use it to buy white dwarfs here sometimes, which give me actually useful white dwarf cards. The red dwarf cards are basically useless at this point. How much the higher level generators exceed the lower level ones. You don't want to buy series 1 cards once you get as far as I have, always series 2 with the Darwinium. I never use it really, but I only, get the free stuff I can, because, well, I'm broke and I can't afford to be spending money. Anyways, if you folks enjoyed this video, take care of each other and yourselves, and may you always find a guiding star lead you on. Adieu, for real this time.